Campion, so you know, what's her name? I'm trying to think the tree. Well, not the treats, but I can't think of her name right now. I know it so well. Her mom is a school teacher, and Camerad, yeah, Kate Camerad. So it's Delaney Camerad. So you must know her. She's just like the first year maybe this year. So that's great. Well, it's good to have you here. And I see some folks here. I see Michael or Mike. You have to go by Mike or Michael. Do I have it right? No, sitting next to Donna. John. Why do I have a Mike in my mind? I went to see John this week. Sorry, John. But your mom's name I remember, Jerry Barker, right? I saw that this week. So good to have you here, John. And I want to introduce you all to a wonderful lady that I met here. She called the church, and I went out to see her, and this is Elizabeth over here. She's been studying, watching 3ABN, and I hope you get acquainted with her. She's just, she knows her Bible so well. She loves to read. She wanted me to bring her a bunch more books from Ellen White and stuff, and so I loaded her down pretty good. But it's good to have you here. This is the first time here, so I hope you get a chance to get acquainted with her. Well, today I want to talk about an awesome God. The first Sabbath I was here about 2 months ago, I told you a little bit of a story that happened to me when I was going through Canada. And some of you said, well, Don, you said you were going to tell the rest of the story, but like Paul Harvey, but you never have. Well, I decided I was going to do it this day. I've been an evangelist for years, traveling all over the United States. And this time I was working for the Ohio conference as the conference evangelist for about 9 years. But I lived in Alaska, because when I started evangelism, I started in Alaska. I was a conference evangelist in Alaska for about 3 years, and I traveled all over Alaska. It was like a paradise. It was like a dream come true for me to travel all over, and they paid for it. You know, I got to go through all southeast Alaska, where you had to go on ferries and fly into villages and all kinds of stuff. That was what I say a blast. You know, it was lots of fun. And so this particular year, I continued to live in Alaska even though I was working for the Ohio conference, because in the summertime you don't do meetings. So I loved Alaska so much, I said, I'll work for you as long as I can have my time in Alaska free in the summertime. And they said, that's fine, because you don't do meetings anyway. So I had 3 months off to go fishing and camping and hiking and all the other things, you know. And so it was a lot of fun. Well, this particular year, I was going to leave Alaska a little bit earlier and head to Oregon, because I had pastored in Oregon for about 10 years before I went to Alaska. And so we had some friends over in a place called Bandon, Oregon. Anybody ever heard of Bandon, Oregon, near Coos Bay, Oregon? And so I'd gone over there many times to see them, but it had been maybe 5 years or so since I'd seen any of those folks. So we were going to go over there, and I have a pickup and a camper that goes on the pickup, and we were going to go kayaking and canoeing and mountain biking up in the Cascades right above Eugene, Oregon. There's the Cascade Mountains up there, and so we were going to go up in there and just spend a week together, and then I was going to preach at Sabbath, the next Sabbath at Bandon, and then head to do a meeting in Ohio. I had it all planned. We had everything loaded. We headed down the road. We got to Vancouver, British Columbia. And as we got to Vancouver, British Columbia, there was a place there called, it's like a SeaWorld type place, but they had another name for it. But it was a place where you could go, and they had beluga whales and some other whales there in Vancouver, BC. It was called Stanley Park. The arrows was Stanley Park. Wouldn't come to me there for a second, but Stanley Park. So we pulled our camper up in there. We parked in this spot where it looked like it was fine. There were a big lawn, huge lawn area all the way around. Artists were out there doing their artwork and selling their artwork, and pottery people, all that. So we thought we were fine. We had our dog, a little German Schnauzer. We had our little rabbit. We had our canoe and kayak up on top, the mountain bikes out front, a pickup camper full of stuff, because we were going to be going to do a meeting in Ohio, so it was just loaded. So we rolled the windows down. This was in August. We rolled the windows down. We thought we'd be fine. Went in there. We were in there in the shop for a short time. And I have a wallet that I usually carry with me in my, in a coat like this as a pastor. But when you put it in your pocket, you know, it's a little more inconvenient and bulgy and stuff like that. And so I thought, well, I'll just take my credit card out of the wallet. And I had about $60 worth of Canadian money. I needed my wife might want to spend some money there in the gift shop. So I thought it was fine, put the wallet under the seat of the truck. I had about $1,000 cash in the wallet. Don't have that much there now, but had about $1,000 cash in the wallet. And so thought it was fine. My wife had a fanny pack with her wallet in it and all that. She put it on the other under the other seat where she was the passenger seat. We went in, about 2 hours we're in there. It was Sunday, afternoon. We come out when they close about 5 o'clock in the evening. Come out and look around, and guess what? No truck. The truck's gone. Now, what in the world? What happened to our truck? Maybe you had to have a little sticker thing to be able to park. You had to buy these little tickets and put it in your window. I thought, well, maybe I didn't do the right thing here, and they towed it away. And so, I was, of course, my wife and daughter, you can imagine what they're doing right now. They're crying because they weren't worried about my nice Dodge truck. What were they worried about? The rabbit and the dog, right? They were worried about the rabbit and the dog. And so we couldn't figure out what in the world is wrong, and they're crying, and I see these signs saying these tow companies that tow people away, and I thought, well, I'll call one of those tow companies. I had a cell phone. I'll call the tow company. They said, we don't have your truck. Called the police. They said, well, what was your license plate number? I said, I don't know. I've never memorized it because I don't stay in usually when you stay in motels, that's when you have to have your license plate number, right? To write on a card there at the motel. I don't stay in motels because I have a pickup camper on the back of my truck. That's where I go. And so, I said, I don't know. And they said, well, we really can't help you then because they couldn't put a APB out. And I said, well, it's going to be hard to miss. It's got a canoe and kayak up on top, mountain bikes out in the front, big pickup camper, red Dodge truck. I mean, how do you miss that, But the police weren't very helpful there in Vancouver. So we thought, well, what can we do? They're crying like crazy, and all we had was just our shorts on. We had the cutoffs, the little shorts, and nothing other than that. All we had was about $20 left in my pocket from money and a charge card, and that was it. And it's getting dark. And I said, honey, we've always told people that when you have bad things happen to you, you need to pray. We've always said you've got to trust in God. And so we knelt down there in the park and we prayed and said, Lord, help us to find where the truck's at and give us wisdom to know what to do and all that. So we prayed, and then immediately I thought I'll call a taxi company because we got to get a motel or something. It's getting dark now, What are we going to do? We don't know anybody there. So we call this taxi company, and the guy comes out, and he was an East Indian guy, and he came out, and he didn't speak very good English, but I was trying to explain to him, how our truck was stolen and all this, and boy, he was so empathetic. I mean, he didn't speak much English, but he was so kind and so empathetic, really a friendly guy. And I said, well, we need to find a motel. So we started going around these different motels and went to the first one. It was $150 a night. And I'm chintzy when it comes to staying in motels. I like to do like the $50 a night thing, not the $150 a night thing. After all, you don't even need a bed to sleep in, right? And so I said, well, you need to go another one. And so he gets to another one, and they were full because there was a convention going on in town. So he tried a few others, and I said, you're going to have to go back to the original one. I just got to pay the $150 a night whether I went to or not. You got to go back to the original. I had my charge card at least still. And so we're heading back, and I'm noticing on his meter there in the taxi, it said it was getting close to $20. And I thought, I only got $20, So I said, you're going to have to stop. I said, because I don't have any more money to pay you. This is all I have is $20. And he said, no worry, not to worry, don't worry. And he took us to the motel there. And by then I was noticing he had a little thing where you could use a charge card. I didn't know because I don't take taxis for anything really. I drive wherever I go. I don't take taxis. So I didn't know they took charge cards, So I was going to pay him with a charge card as we got to that motel. And he said, no, you're my brother. You're my brother. And I'll tell you what, I started crying, because that touched me. I knew I had a lot more money than he had, but I just couldn't get it. I didn't have any ID, didn't have a driver's license, didn't have any ID because they got my wallet, and I only had that $20 in that charge card, and I knew the other charge card was in my wife's in her wallet, so we're going to have to cancel that charge card sooner or later. So, but he showed so much kindness, and even some of the motels we went to that were full, I was telling them a little bit about the story about our truck getting stolen. We had our daughter, which was about 10 years old, and they would give her stuffed toys and different things at the motels. The people were really nice. People are generally nice in the world we live in. We think they're all bad, but they're really nice. And so we settled down in the motel, and I'd already called that tow company. Remember, and the tow company said, we don't have your truck. But they said, we have another yard that we tow vehicles to about 30 miles away in Surrey, British Columbia. And they said, call us back. So as soon as I got the motel room, I called him. I said, this is, Don. And I said, you probably remember I just called you, an hour or two ago about my truck getting stolen. And do you have it there in your other yard? And she said, no, I'm sorry, sir. I feel really bad, but we don't have it. And just as I was talking to her on the phone, she got a dispatch over her radio from the Surrey, British Columbia Police saying that there's a red Dodge truck parked up on a curb of a residential neighborhood. We want you to come and we want you to tow it away. And I said, that's got to be mine. They said there was a pickup camper on it. I said, it's got to be mine. There's too much of a coincidence, And can I go get it? And she said, no, you have to wait till it's towed to the tow yard. And this was like, 10 o'clock at night, something like that. And so, these two ladies, that one was a nurse and one was, I don't know, I can't remember what she did, but one was a nurse. I'll remember this. She had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go to work. But you know what? These two ladies, one of their missions to people in their community was to help people like us. They came to our motel room, they picked us up, they drove us 30 miles to Surrey, British Columbia at 1 o'clock in the morning. At 1 o'clock in the morning. She had to go to work at 5 o'clock in the morning. Remember this. She comes out at 1 o'clock in the morning, they take us out there to get our truck. I mean, generally people are good. We say people are bad, but I think there's a lot of good people in this world today. We don't recognize it sometimes, and we need to be looking for those people. Those people, need to hear more of the truth, like Elizabeth. You get acquainted with Elizabeth. She's a wonderful lady, but you hadn't learned about the Sabbath and all those things, had you, Elizabeth? But now you've been watching 3ABN, you're learning about the Sabbath, listen to John Loma McCain. I mean, there's a lot of wonderful people out there, isn't it? And I couldn't stop thinking about you, Elizabeth, when he was singing that song where it said, love, 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 because that's a theme that she has, that we need to love. And that's a good theme, I think. That's a good theme. So there we are. They take us to 1 o'clock in the morning to the wrecking yard, the tow yard where they had taken everything. And we go there, and of course the canoe and the kayak were gone. The mountain bikes were gone. The rabbit was gone. The dog was in the back seat of the truck. And if you ever had a German Schnauzer dog, they bark, 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 bark all the time, And that dog's just sitting there in the back seat all docile. Usually when that dog would see my wife, that dog would just, because they were like best buddies, jump into her lap. And the dog just sitting there like, hi, Mom, is that you? They had drugged the dog. We got there, everything was gone out of the camper. I mean, they took our underwear, they took everything, they took our dirty underwear even. I mean, they took everything out of the camper. There wasn't anything left. They pulled all the drawers out, and you know how campers are, you store stuff. They took the Bibles, they took I had sermons that I would preach, and I always, as an evangelist, I always carry sermons with me in case somebody asked me to preach in a place. I wouldn't have to try to prepare something right away. Took all those, which is probably good because you get lazy if you start using ones that are there, And so all my ID was gone, everything was gone. So, we thought, well, we got the truck back. I went back to the motel, and we thought, Lord, thank you. That thing you were talking about in the Sabbath school class, gratitude. I mean, it seemed like we'd never get that truck back, but we got it back, that same night, basically. And like I said, the ignition was all popped out, the door lock was popped out. That's how they got in. But, they took one of the batteries out of the truck. There's 2 batteries in the diesel trucks. And so, I had to figure out what I was going to do the next day because, as you know, you hate to lose your Dodge truck 2 days in a row, right? He's got a lot of Dodge trucks. You hate to lose them 2 days in a row. So next morning I get up and go down to the Dodge dealer, get a new battery, get the door lock, get the new ignition, because I still have that charge card, but I knew it was going to get canceled sooner or later. And so, we got taken care of that. Then we thought, well, what are we going to do now? Here we are. We don't even have any clothes. We don't have anything, The rabbit's gone. Everything's gone. What do we do? So we prayed, God, what do you want us to do? And you know how God will impress you in your mind with things? I'm not saying God just verbally answered me, but God impressed in our mind to stay there in Vancouver, that God was going to help us get many of our things back, even get the rabbit back. That seemed like a needle in a haystack in a big town like that, But you have to listen to God. When God speaks to you in your mind, you have to believe that what he says is true, and you have to follow it, even though other people may say you're nuts, because anybody else that we told, even other fellow Seventh-day Adventists, and we told them that God impressed us to stay there, they would say, no, you just put that in your own mind. because you want your rabbit back, you want your things back. That's just common sense. Everybody wants their stuff back, right? So you put that in your own mind so you could, feel good about it. But we just felt God impressed us. So my wife said, well, why don't we call Crime Stoppers? and so I called Crime Stoppers, and there was a sergeant there at Crime Stoppers, a lady, and she said, no, we don't really get involved in this, but she says, I know some people at the television and some people at the newspaper that will help you. So we found a Seventh-day Adventist church, and we were parked in the parking lot that next day in the Seventh-day Adventist church. That night, about 5 o'clock in the evening, the newspaper came out, and the television people came out, and actually it was before that. It was probably about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I guess. They came out, and they interviewed us. And that night, on television, it was on the 5 and 6 o'clock news about this family. They had a picture of my little daughter, so cute, and my wife, and in the pickup truck, and they're telling a story about this family from Alaska that gets all their things stolen, and so they had it on the 5 and 6 o'clock news. Then the next day, it came out like on the second page of the newspaper, great big in Vancouver. That's a big newspaper. The second page, great big spiel, and the title was "Heat Put on Snowflake's Thieves." Snowflake was the name of the bunny rabbit. Heat put on Snowflake's thieves. And of course, I had offered a $500 reward for the return of the rabbit. I knew I'd be able to eventually get money because there was a lady that the pastor told us about that we could go stay in her. She ran one of these nursing homes out of her own home, where people would come and stay with her in her own home. And her name was LaDonna. And she let us stay there she said that we stay there in her parking lot, and we could use her shower. She had an extra bedroom and we could use a shower in there and stuff. And so I had talked to LaDonna a little bit, and LaDonna said, well, I know you don't have any ID, but in the pickup trucks on a Dodge truck, anybody ever seen a Dodge truck? You know about the Dodge trucks. When they have a back seat in the Dodge trucks, in the middle seat in the Dodge truck, that seat folds up and down. And there's a whole compartment inside there, a huge compartment inside there. You can store stuff. So I had a bunch of checkbooks in there, for my accounts that I do for evangelism and my personal checkbooks. I had them in there. But the seat was folded up when the thief stole everything, so they didn't know about that that little compartment in there. So there was a bunch of stuff in there. So LaDonna said I could go down to her bank and I could write a check for, and she would verify it with the bank and I could get money. So the lady from Crime Stoppers, of course, came out the next day and brought us some. I think I had a San Francisco 49ers sweatshirt and some underwear and socks for my daughter and things for my wife. Just a little bit of stuff to keep us going for a day or so, because we didn't even have any clothes at all other than what we had on us. So here we are, in this situation, and we know God is really working and God is really impressing. So we say God impresses us to stay there. So it's on the news about this $500 reward for a bunny rabbit. So now we're here at LaDonna's house, and now we're going through the week. And as we're going through the week, this is on a Sunday. Remember what happened. Monday, I was going to pawn shops, flea markets by Tuesday. Didn't find anything. Found a lot of other good deals, but none of my stuff. Went to all kinds of places for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, nothing. Didn't find a single thing. And so now you can imagine that the people that we told that God impressed us to stay there because we were going to get some things back, they were also beginning to question it, right? They were starting to say, well, I thought you said, you're going to get the rabbit back and all this. Well, during those 4 days, people would call up and say, I saw your rabbit down in a park, and it's down in such a park. So I'd go down to that park, and you can imagine me, I'm crawling under these little logs, and I'm saying, here, Snowflake, calling for the rabbit, and never found the rabbit. And I'll never forget in that particular park where they said they saw the rabbit. And, when you have a pickup and a camper, that camper I have sticks out 4 feet beyond the pickup truck. So it's a big deal, a dually truck with a pickup camper. So hard to find a place to park in downtown areas. I couldn't find a place to park, and I thought, well, I'm only going to be here a short time looking for this rabbit. So I just parked in a no parking zone. As I was heading back, I didn't find a rabbit. As I'm heading back, I see this sticker underneath my windshield. Thinking, oh no, I got a ticket. That's what I need is a ticket right now, I pulled it out, looked at it, and it was a note on it. Somebody had taken a piece of paper and written a note, and they said, please don't give these people a ticket. They're trying to find something that is very valuable to them. How they knew, I don't even know who it was. God was working somehow there, because they probably saw a lot of people there in Vancouver saw that television thing, and they also saw the second page ad, huge big newspaper article. They saw it, you know. So they knew who we were. They probably saw the Alaska license plates, and so that really touched me that somebody would do that, write a note on our thing. Please don't give these people a ticket, you know. And so that week, people had called and said, you know, we want to give you a rabbit, or I think I found your rabbit. We go there, and they go to their house, and nothing. In fact, we got all the way through Friday, and nothing happened. On Friday, I'd been going to pawn shops, because, you know, pawn shops are basically a license to steal. You know, people sell a lot of stolen stuff at pawn shops. That's what they tell you. So I go in the pawn shops, nothing. But I'm in this pawn shop on Friday, and my wife is sitting in the truck. And, of course, the dog was fine. Just so you know, the dog, once it got over the drug thing, it was fine. But my wife's sitting in the passenger seat, and some guy by the name of Carl comes walking by, and apparently he's talking to her. I first thought maybe he was flirting with her or something, you know, because she's a good-looking chick, you know, so maybe he was flirting with her. So, but it turned out he was just interested. He said to her, "Why are you here in Vancouver?" So she started telling the story, and about that time I came out of the pawn shop, and so we were telling the story about what happened, and he said, "Well, you know, why don't you stay at my place tonight?" We were over in Surrey, British Columbia by now. And he said, "Why don't you stay at my place tonight, because there's a big flea market tomorrow that they start setting up at 1 o'clock in the morning." And he said, that is so big that everybody goes to that. Maybe you'll find some of your stuff there. And I said, "Well, I don't really feel comfortable staying in your house, but would you mind if we just parked our pickup camper in your driveway?" And so we did, and we spent Saturday there with him, there in his place, and we got to talking with him a lot. And remember LaDonna, where we were staying? LaDonna was really questioning that God would get our rabbit back and these things, because her husband had left her for a younger woman, and she had been praying that her husband would come back, and guess what? Her husband didn't come back. So in LaDonna's mind, God doesn't answer prayer. Carl, as we're visiting with him on Saturday, Carl was a Baptist guy. His wife had been diagnosed with cancer and was, you know, on death's bed, and he prayed for her that God would heal her, and guess what? His wife died. So in his mind, God doesn't answer prayer. So when we tell these people that God told us we're supposed to stay here and we're going to get the rabbit back and these things, in their minds, it's not going to happen. In fact, that Saturday, somebody had called. We had a message phone over at LaDonna's place. Somebody had called and said, "We think we have your rabbit." And Carl said, "Well, why don't I go with you? I'll drive you over there." He takes us over there. I go in, and it wasn't our rabbit, you know, so that was just one more nail in the coffin that Carl says, God doesn't answer prayer. He said, "You're never going to get your rabbit back. Somebody ate that rabbit already, you know." That didn't make my wife feel too good. But there we were. I get up at 1 o'clock not 1 o'clock in the morning, but they started setting up at 1 o'clock. I got up about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I went to that flea market that started really early in the morning. Didn't find anything. I went to a number of flea markets in that whole area on that day. Nothing. Found a lot of other good deals, like I said, but none of my stuff. Now here we are, a week later, it's Sunday. Now guess what? We are also beginning to have doubts. Because, you know, it can happen to any of us. Our faith can be tested. We were also beginning to have doubts. Well, maybe these people are right. You know, maybe we thought we were hearing God's voice, and because now a week has gone by and nothing's happened, maybe they're right. But I said we can't take that attitude, because we have to believe what God said is true, because once we start doubting, it'll take you down a road that is never ending, right? You'll never stop. I said we have to believe that God is going to do it. I don't know how God's going to do it. We're running out of time now, because I'm getting ready to start an evangelistic meeting about a week later, and I have to get all the way to Ohio, and we had to cancel the meetings, the people with the canoeing and kayaking and all that stuff in Oregon, because we didn't have mountain bikes and canoes and kayaks anyway, so we had to cancel all that. And so, you know, here we are a Sunday later, and I'm thinking, oh, Lord, what do we do? You know, and so it's about 6 o'clock at night. All of a sudden, I call LaDonna to ask her if there's any messages for us. That was kind of my every day. I would call her, is there any messages for us? She said, yeah, there's a gal by the name of Carrie that called, and she says she thinks she has your rabbit. So I call Carrie up on the phone. I said, Carrie, I understand that you think you might have a rabbit that we put a reward out for it. She says, yeah. I said, well, where did you get it at? She said, well, I was walking in the park. She had like 4 kids, all by different husbands. by different men. She wasn't married, kind of like the woman, remember, talked about, all the different husbands, so forth. Well, Carrie, when I was asking her how she got the rabbit, she said, well, I was walking in the park with my kids, and these two guys came up to me, and they said, oh, you've got some kids. We found this rabbit. Would you like to have it? And I said, what do they look like? And she said, well, I don't know. They weren't white. They were East Indian. The way she worded all that was like she was trying to hide something. So I thought, well, there may be more to this, So I said, can I come right over? So I get over to her house about 7 o'clock at night. By the time I get there, it's starting to get, just twilight. It's not dark, but it's twilight. It was in August. And my wife didn't want to go into the house because she'd already been disappointed in the past, because there was no rabbit in the park. There was no rabbit. People said that people wanted to give us rabbits and stuffed bunny rabbits, all kinds of things, but never our rabbit. So I get there. I go in and knock on the door. Carrie invites me in. There's a big box that looks like what a washer or a dryer would come in. I look down the bottom of the box, and guess what? There was the rabbit. So I go back out to the truck, and I say, April, Snowflake is here. You can imagine how fast she got out of that truck. She was in that house just like that. She almost like she was flying. She takes Snowflake out of the bottom of that box. And her and that rabbit were really close. They cuddled all the time. When she'd have her devotionals, she'd hold that rabbit and stuff and just kiss and love that rabbit. It was a white lop-eared bunny rabbit. And so she loved that little rabbit. And so did my daughter. And so she grabbed that thing up out of that box and held it. And I don't think I've ever heard that rabbit make noises, but it was making these little squeaky noises, almost like, oh, thank you, you're here. Somebody's got me. I'm back with my mom, And so we go out to the truck, and I tell Carrie before I leave, I said, well, I don't have the $500 right now, but I'll come back tomorrow. I'll get the money. I'll come back tomorrow with your $500 reward. But I couldn't accuse her of anything. You could tell she was lying because her daughter, kids have a hard time having a poker face. When she's telling all these things, she has all these kids. One of them's about an 8, 10-year-old, and it's like the one 8-year-old's like, Mom, why would you say that? That isn't how it happened, But I couldn't say, hey, you're lying, So I thought, well, we got the rabbit back. So we get out in the truck, we start heading down the road, and there was no food. It was on a Sunday night now, about 7 o'clock or so at night. There's no stores open to get rabbit food, and there's no food that she said she ran out of food. So I just prayed, Lord, help us to find some red clover, because they love wild red clover. In fact, it's like a delicacy for them, so you pick it and they just love it. So I said, Lord, help us to find some red clover. And so as soon as I get done praying, I'm driving down the road, and there right immediately on the side of the road is some red clover growing. And so I whip over to the side of the road, and I'm getting ready to get out of the truck, and a guy pulls around up in front of me about 50 feet or so. He throws his door wide open, and he comes running back towards my truck. I'm thinking, wow. I guess road rage. I thought road rage. Maybe I didn't turn my blinker on fast enough. I thought the guy's mad. I was thinking road rage. And so I thought, well, God's protected us so far through all this stuff. So I just rolled my window down and I said, what can I do for you? And he said, well, I know who stole your truck, and I know where some of your things are at. And if you don't get the police involved, I'll help you find them. I'll help you get them back. So, well, this is only like about 5 blocks away from where we just got the rabbit back. And I was thinking, well, this is some kind of setup or something. It's kind of weird. 5 blocks away, all of it's happening at one time. And I said, well, I already asked the police said they couldn't help me. So I said, I will get the police involved. And so he says, follow me. So he gets back in his car. I follow him. We drive about 30 minutes to another part of town, a residential neighborhood. He takes me to this house. We go in the back of the house where there's a little shop back there, and there's my kayak. Charlie was the name of the guy. I found out afterwards. I didn't know at first. It was Charlie. He was driving a stolen car. He had different license plates on the front than he did on the back. He's driving a stolen car, and he's had me follow him through town. Well, Charlie, apparently, as the story goes, Charlie turns out he was one of the guys that stole the truck. There were 3 guys that stole the truck, and there were a girl, and the 3 guys that stole the truck, they all took it what the original plan was is they were going to sell the camper. A guy wanted the camper, so they were going to sell the camper. Then they were going to take the camper off, take the truck back to their house, strip the truck of all of its things. In fact, that was their plan with anything. They just strip everything, they sell it for parts, and somehow they get rid of the rest of it. And so apparently we went to the guy that wanted the camper. He said, that's an older camper. I don't want an old camper like that. Good thing I had an older one, Don't buy new stuff. You're driving around old stuff, you're better off, And so he said, I don't want that. He said, besides, there's a dog in the truck. He said, there's these people are from Alaska. He said, I don't want to get involved in this. So by then they had driven the truck long enough, they didn't want to get in, keep driving in case they get in trouble by the police. So they just parked it up on that curb in the residential neighborhood. That's how I got it back, God had a plan. God thwarted their plan, right? And so, I'm following Charlie, and we're loading that kayak up on top of the truck. And before, I had this special system that I had installed that you could crank. You put a rope on it, you can crank it right up on top. You don't have to get up and tie things down. It ties it all down. It's just cranking it up. Well, they cut all those ropes, so they weren't any good anymore. And so I was trying to figure out how am I going to tie it down. So we're trying to find ropes or something to tie the kayak down. And meanwhile, the two gals that were living in the house, they were both strung out on drugs. They were definitely, they were probably on meth because their faces were just all pot-marked, pimples and stuff. That's how you can tell a lot of times with meth. Their faces will really be terrible shape. And so, they're saying, Charlie, you owe me $25 for storing the kayak here. Well, by then I had some money on me. I think I got a few $100s from LaDonna at the bank one time. So I gave $25. Well, it was a $1,000 kayak, $25. That's not much to get it back. And I never even used it even one time. This is the first time I could have used it anyway on this trip. And so got it back. And as I'm loading up, the girl says, well, I know where so I had a pair of mucklucks made for me because I was going to be doing a meeting in a cold place in Alaska. So she said, I know where your mucklucks are at. If you give me $25, I'll go get them for you. So I give her $25. She'll get to my mucklucks, brings them back, and then I never see her again. She probably used it all for drugs, of course, She left. And we're loading the kayak up on top, and two big, brawny motorcycle guys. Big old guys, kind of like Dave. Where's Dave at? Big old guy like Dave, big motorcycle guy. They come up and they holler out, Charlie, we're going to kill you. And they weren't kidding either. This was no joke or anything. We're going to kill you. And I'm like, what in the world are these guys so mad? They're using every foul word you can think of. They are mad. Thinking, what are they so mad about, And I thought, well, maybe, because Charlie was worried by helping us, he might get in trouble. Might get killed, that he even told me that from the very beginning. But the reason Charlie decided to help us is because when Charlie saw my wallet, and he found my wallet and with that money in it and all my ID, it had my ministerial credentials there in my wallet. And of course he saw all the Bibles and religious materials. So when Charlie realized I was a minister, he said to the other guys, he said, I don't want to have anything to do with this. He said, he's a minister. We're going to go to hell. We're going to go to hell because he was raised Pentecostal. His parents were Pentecostal. So I always tell people, if you're ever traveling, carry a fake ID with you, like ministerial credentials. That might help you out a little bit at the end. Who knows? But he didn't want to. In fact, Charlie told me that he took all my ID and my sermons and all the stuff, and he put it in one of those mailboxes. Those big mailboxes you see on the side of the road in Vancouver area. Well, I never got any of that back because never try to deal with the government. Try to deal with the government. They're not going to help you at all, because it's just a bunch of stuff thrown into a mailbox, and they just take it to another location, and there's no way to identify it, and they're not going to help you. They're not going to let you go there and look through their stuff to see if you can find your stuff. They're not going to help you at all. That's the government thing, So I never did get any of that back. But Charlie, as we're loading the kayak up on top of the rig, all of a sudden, as these motorcycles guys come up, I wonder, why are they so mad? Well, that gal that was supposed to go get the mucklucks, she got the mucklucks and left. That $25 she was supposed to give them, they had my mucklucks. And they were after Charlie because they didn't get that $25. Well, she left and was after the drugs. And so now I give them $25 and they seem to be all right. But, it's amazing what happens to the guys. They turn to jelly. My wife was sitting in the truck and they didn't realize she was there. I was outside and they looked in there and said, oh, I didn't realize. They're using every foul word you can think about. And all of a sudden they see her there and said, oh, I didn't know there was a woman here. I wouldn't have used this foul language around a woman. And my wife points to my daughter. She was hiding behind the back seat. She points to my daughter behind the back seat in the truck and she says, my daughter's right there. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know there was a child here. I would have never talked like it. It was like they turned into jelly or something. So even these guys that are hitmen for the mafia, they still love their kids and they still are family men, a lot of these guys, And so it's amazing what God was doing there, because all of a sudden another guy comes up from the neighborhood while we're loading the kayak up, and he says, I know where your mountain bikes are at. They're in a pawn shop. He said, if I have the pawn slips for them, he said, if you don't get the police involved, I'll give you these pawn slips and you can go back and get them back. Go to the pawn shop and get them back. Okay, at least God's showing me He's working now. I remember we had gone all week long and nothing happened, And now we got the rabbit back. And now we got the truck back. And now we've got the kayak back. And Charlie says, follow me. And we head across town to another place. And I thought we were going to another house. And Charlie says, park here. It was like a Denny's. It was they call them white spots there in Canada, but they're like a Denny's. He said, park here. I'll be right back. So I had my wife and daughter go into the Denny's, into the white spot. And I said, it's like 10 o'clock at night now, I said, why don't you go in there? I don't know what's going to happen now, just stay in there. I want to keep you safe. And so I'm waiting for Charlie to come back, and he comes back, and he has a whole carload of our stuff. I mean, this whole car is filled with black plastic bags and other things, whole carload of our stuff. I didn't even know what was in them because, it was just black plastic bags full of stuff, and I'm throwing them in the back of the camper. And Charlie says, well, we can't go to the house right now, the house where they were going to take the truck. And where they'd taken everything out of the truck, and because they took the camper and the truck to that house, and they stripped everything out of it. Then they went to sell it to the guy that won the camper. So they had all of our stuff there at this house, and so Charlie says, you can't go there right now because they're still there and they have guns. The two guys and the girl were still there. They have guns, and so he said, he gave me a phone number to call him, and he said, call me and we'll get together tomorrow morning and I'll take you to the house. And I'm thinking, well, I wonder if he'll ever even answer the phone, because this all happened just this one night, what's going to happen tomorrow? And so we go back to LaDonna's place that night and talk about an attitude of gratitude. I mean, we couldn't sleep all night long. We're just praying and crying and thanking God. It seemed like beyond any possibility that you'd ever get these things back. And the rabbit, in a big city like Vancouver, British Columbia, it seemed like it was an impossible thing that could ever happen. And everybody said it was going to be impossible. Everybody said you can't trust what God said to you. It's on your own mind. And even we begin to wonder, but we had to stay strong and trust in God. And now it starts happening. But God taught me a lesson there too. Because I tend to be able to accomplish a lot on my own in life. And a lot of guys are this way. Some women too. But guys tend to be more guilty of this even than women. Because you can accomplish so much on your own, you often don't trust in the Lord enough. And that was my problem. I figured that I would go to pawn shops, and I would go to flea markets, and I would find my stuff. I think the reason God waited a whole week is because it took a whole week for me to finally be humbled enough to say, God, I don't know. I thought this is what you said, but it's not happening. And when I finally was like I was giving up, so to speak, it was finally like God says, okay, now I'm going to have somebody pull you over on the side of the road and start getting your stuff back for you. Which then it's not you. It's not you doing it, it's God doing it. And so, we didn't sleep all night long. The next day, I called Charlie, and that day I left my daughter with LaDonna there at her house. And we met Charlie. He answered the phone. I didn't know if he would. He answered the phone, and he said, meet me at this gas station at such and such a place. I meet at this gas station. He takes us to the house where the truck was taken after it was stolen. And we go through the house, and you can see a car, a Datsun pickup truck was just leaving, very quickly. Charlie must have said something to him because they thought the police were coming or something, because they left so quickly, two girls and a guy driving right by down the road. And so we go in the house, and you see handguns laying, and handguns in Canada are a no-no. You see handguns laying all over on counters, and so these people were real criminals. They weren't like the lightweight criminals. These were criminals. You go out into the garage, and there's a Jeep like you would have, Troy, right there in their shop, a brand new Jeep being all gutted and all the stuff taken out of it. That's what they're going to do to our truck. And so we found all kinds of our stuff there in the house. My wife had a bunch of nice dresses like you wear, in the camper, and all those had been taken out of the camper, and now they were in a black plastic bag. And you talked about smoked salmon. We were talking about smoked salmon. I had a bunch of smoked salmon that I'd bought to bring to people, canned salmon. Well, they had eaten all that stuff. So here was watermelon, smoked salmon, cans, stinky stuff, all in this garbage can, but here's a black bag in the garbage can that has all my wife's nice dresses in them, and they weren't hurt at all. So, I mean, we found stuff around the washers and dryers, every place we were finding stuff. And so then Charlie says, well, I'm going to take you to some other places to get some of your stuff back. So we go to a secondhand store. I've been to a lot of them there in Vancouver, but I hadn't been to this particular one because there's a lot of them. Secondhand store, I walk in. The guy, every place we went, people knew who we were because they saw that television ad and they saw that article in the newspaper. When I walked into that secondhand store, that guy had a really guilty look on his face because a lot of my stuff was there. I used to be a mechanic, so I always carry a lot of tools with me when I'm traveling because when you're out in the middle of nowhere in Alaska, you have to be able to fix stuff. You can't just count on somebody helping you. So I've never been broken down in Alaska where I couldn't get someplace to fix it myself. So I had all these extra tools, I carry with me. And so most of them were Craftsman. I had some Snap-on and others, but mostly Craftsman because they're cheaper. And so I those were all taken, of course. But I start looking around and I find a lot of my stuff, big, 12-ton floor bottle jacks and a bunch of stuff I found there. So that guy was so guilty, he said to me, well, you just take whatever you want. So the way they put tools, in pawn shops and those places, they're just bins of sockets, bins of wrenches, it's hard to find your stuff out of all that unless you had it all marked good. So I just picked out what I wanted because that guy took a lot of stolen stuff. So I actually ended up with better tools in the end than I did before, Dave. So God has a way of working. So we went to all these different places, and now, this is already now into the next week. This is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We're going to different places. He takes me to his parents' house. They were the most naive Pentecostal parents I'd ever seen. They were so sweet. My little baby Charlie is like an angel, Well, they have a little storage thing below their apartment building there where there's all these apartments. They have these little storage for people to store their things in. You open that storage, and here's all these duffel bags. And you think they'd ask Charlie, where did you get all these duffel? Why would you need, like 25 duffel bags, Well, how people carry their stuff in duffel bags, and they break into their cars and they steal them and stuff. So he has all these duffel bags in there, but they say, my little Charlie, he's so innocent, And so, I got a few things back there, but now we're all the way to the end of the week now. We're all the way now to Friday. It slowed down, through that week. Towards the end, I got a few things here, pawn shop here, a house here, get a few things here and there. We got about 90% of our stuff back. Never got our canoe back. We got our mountain bikes back, we got our kayak back, and about 90% of the stuff back. Now, I was really running out of time because I had to go do this meeting in Ohio. So I had to get going. It was Friday. And I thought, well, we've got to go talk to Carl, the one where he stayed in his house where his wife had died of cancer. We got to go talk to Carl before we leave and tell him the story of what happened to us this last week. Because Carl didn't believe in prayer. So we go and we tell Carl the story about what happened to us this week and how we got all these things back. And now Carl's like crying. And Carl's like, I guess God really does answer prayer. I guess I can't blame God because my wife died. Things do happen. Bad things can happen. But he said, this story tells me that God can answer prayer. We serve an awesome God. And he says, can you come tell this story at my Baptist church sometime? And so I said, sure. It never did happen, because I lost track of him. But just going through the right time through Vancouver again. But it was interesting. Now Carl was a believing. LaDonna, who had lost her husband because he went with a younger woman. Now LaDonna believes in prayer too, because she had watched. We had been there at the house, so she's watching what's happening all week long. So now LaDonna believes in prayer. We had gone to that pawn shop we got in to get our bicycles back. It was one of these ones that has a locked door. You have to push a button to get into it. And so we get in there, and he's kind of a gruff guy. The pawn shop guy is kind of a gruff guy, and I give him these pawn slips, and he says, well, you owe me $75 for each bike. And here's this lady in there, and I start telling the guy this story about how our rabbit got stolen, our truck got stolen, how God got all these things back. He wasn't all that interested in the story, to be honest with you, but the people that were in the pawn shop that overheard the story, this one gal who was pawning some jewelry in the pawn shop, she's like tears rolling down her face, and she says, give him his mountain bikes back, And so they're like a few different people, give him the mountain bikes back. Well, in the end, I had to pay a little bit to get each one of them back, because he had to pay something to get them in the first place, but I remember being in a restaurant and talking to a rabbi, believe it or not, in a restaurant about the whole story. And he's listening with like awe, in the story. And it's just like, exciting things are happening. But now we talked to of course, Carl. And I said, honey, we've got to leave now. We were going to stop by Bandon, Oregon on the way to Ohio and preach there on the next day, Sabbath, and then head on to Ohio the next day, Sunday. And so April says, my wife says, we've got to talk to Carrie. Because remember Carrie, the one that had the rabbit? I told her I'd be back the next day. Well, I called Carrie that next day and I said, Carrie, I understand that it was your boyfriend, one of your boyfriend. Well, there were three guys, Charlie, but one of the other two guys was her boyfriend. He was the father of one of those kids. He's the one that was involved in stealing the truck. And she just immediately said, I don't want the reward. I don't want anything to do with it, because she didn't want to get involved in all that. She says, and she basically hung up. I thought, well, I guess that's all done, we'll probably talk to her ever again. But my wife says, we've got to talk to Carrie. So my wife calls Carrie up on the phone. And she spends probably an hour or so talking with Carrie, talking about the Lord and talking about, different things with her. And then I thought, well, okay. She had prayer with her, and I thought, well, now we're going to leave Canada and head to Oregon, then on to Ohio. Then my wife says, we got to go see Carrie personally. And okay, I guess she said, God impressed me. We got to go see Carrie personally. Okay. So we drove, like 30 minutes, to Carrie's place to see her. And I see this girl going down the sidewalk with a stroller. You know how ladies use that stroller sometimes? She had like a stroller with a double stroller, and then she had a couple kids besides that. She had like 4 kids. And I said, that looks like Carrie. And because I only met her one time, and my wife had only seen her one time. And so my wife says, no, that's not Carrie. That's not her. So I just said, well, you must be right. So we go to Carrie's house and knock on the door, nothing. So me being a Dick Tracy I am, I go around to the backyard and think, well, maybe she's back there or something. So I go to the backyard, open the gate, go in there. And in the backyard, there's all these toys and a bunch of Hot Wheel toys. My daughter collected Hot Wheel toys. And she had all these Hot Wheel toys, but there was only maybe 2 or 3 of them that she got at that house where we went, where everything was set. The rest of them were gone. So I don't know what happened to them, but I saw these Hot Wheel toys, and I saw this double-decker bus. And I said, well, that looks like one of my daughters. So I took it back to the truck, and I said, Megan, is that your Hot Wheel toy? And you know how kids are. Oh yeah, see that scratch right there? That's mine. It's like they know them real well, right? And so I took that Hot Wheel toy, and I said, that must have been Carrie back down where that shopping center area is, like a Toys R Us and McDonald's, all those. I said, that must have been Carrie down there. So we headed back down there, and my wife and I separated, and she went to Toys R Us, and I went to McDonald's. Well, as I'm going to McDonald's, guess who's walking out of McDonald's with her kids? Carrie. She recognized me, and I recognized her. It was an awkward moment because she had hung up the phone before, right? It was an awkward moment, and I thought, well, what do I say, Lord? Even though I'm a pastor, I don't always know the right words to say, friends. We have to pray for God's wisdom all the time, don't we? I don't have like this spiel that just comes out of my mouth that I'm some genius and I know exactly what to say, We have to pray for wisdom every single time we meet an individual, that God will give us the right words. And so I said, God, I'm just praying, God, give me the right words. And it's like she wanted to ignore me. And all she would say is, she kind of went like that. She says, I don't want to have anything to do with this. That was the father of one of my boys. And she said, I don't have anything to do with it. She says, I don't know where any of your other things are at. I don't want to be involved. And she was ready to walk away. But about that time, one of her kids had a snow cone, an ice cream cone, and it fell, to the ground there on the concrete right outside McDonald's. So I guess she was just a neat enough person. She didn't want to just leave it there. So she sent one of the kids in to get it some paper towels or whatever, napkins to wipe it up. And still I'm praying, Lord, I know you didn't bring me here for just this. I didn't drive over here just to have a confrontation with her about things, about what we can get or what we can't get. I'm just pleading with the Lord, and as she's wiping up those things and gets done, all I could do is walk up to her and say, Carrie, I said, I don't care about who stole this truck, or I don't care about getting anything back more. I said, all I care is that you know that Jesus loves you. That's all that would come out of my mouth. I didn't know that's what I was going to say. But I said, all I care about is that you know that Jesus loves you. And immediately she started bawling like a baby. Tears rolling down her cheek. My wife walks up about that time, and my wife puts her arms around her and holds her, and Carrie, for probably 10 minutes, is just crying and crying and crying. And now we're talking with her about Jesus and how Jesus loves her and how Jesus wants to have her to have a better life and wants her future to be a good future. And anything that we could come up with that the Lord impressed us with, we were trying to share with her about the love of God for her and her kids. And she's just crying. And I always remember my wife said as she's holding her against her, she says, her hair smells so good, so clean. My wife remembers those things like that, but because she was basically a good person, a clean person, and took care of her kids and all that, but she just had led a bad life. And we said, God wants your life to be different. And now, of course, we pray with her, and it's time to go. We're running out of time. It's getting, Friday, basically noon or something like that, and I got to drive all the way to Bandon, Oregon from basically Vancouver, which is quite a ways, and so I got to get there and preach the next morning, and so we got to go. But Carrie now is following us to the truck, our truck and camper. It's like she doesn't want us to go now. First she wants to get rid of me. Now she doesn't want us to go. She wants to know more and hear more. So we're talking with her, and so as we're talking outside the camper, I'll never forget this. My little daughter Megan, she walks up into the camper, and I don't know what she was doing. I had no idea. She had a little cowboy hat that we had, but that got stolen. She never got it back. But at one of those flea markets we were at, when we told them a story about our stuff being stolen, somebody gave her a little hat, little cowboy hat. So she had that cowboy hat, and she had those 3 little Hot Wheel toys that she got back. But that's all she got back, really. She walks up into the camper. She comes out of the camper. You know what she does? Those 4 kids, she gives each one of them one of those toys and that hat. That's all she got back. And she gave it to them. And I've always thought, you always pray that your kids will learn something from you in life, that people are more important than things. And so then of course we left, and we're heading down the road, and we get to the border, and right before we cross the border, I thought, I'm gonna call that lady from Crime Stoppers, that sergeant from Crime Stoppers. I hadn't talked to her all week, and I said, I'm gonna call her and just let her know what happened. So I call her, let her know what happened, and I was telling her how God got all these things back, and our rabbit back, and all that, and she was so flabbergasted. It's like she was so shocked. She said, I have never heard of anything like this happening in the history of police work. Never have I heard about people, taking you to their different houses and giving you things back. And she said, do you mind if I tell this story to the other officers here at Crime Stoppers? And I said, yeah, tell them the story, as long as they recognize that God gets the glory, that God is the one that did this, that it wasn't me, it was God, And so then I go to the border crossing, and you know how sometimes at the border, those guards at the border are kind of gruff, because they have so many people. They usually, I go in and out of Alaska so much, it's like I have a diesel engine, so it's like, first of all, turn your engine off. And part of the problem is I have my engine on a timer situation where it has to get down to about 300 degrees before it'll shut off. Well, sometimes they get annoyed with me because I can turn the key off and the engine's going to keep running until it gets down to 300 degrees. So I have to kind of explain it to them. And they usually get annoyed with me, And so this guy's one of those gruff guys, and turn your engine off. And then next question is what were you doing in Canada? And so I said, well, we were there in Canada. How long were you there? And well, we were there longer than we anticipated because we had our truck stolen. So I was trying to make it brief because you know how cars start lining up behind you at border crossings? And I don't want to hold the line up, so I'm trying to make it brief. But this guy now, who started out gruff, when I was telling him how God got our rabbit back and our truck back, now he's asking me detail after detail. I'm like there like 10, 15 minutes, this guy's asking me questions, and the line's getting longer and longer back there, And I'm thinking about the line, but I'm also thinking, well, I guess God must want me to tell him this story, So I tell him the story, and then I end up in Bandon, Oregon. But I'll never forget, on my way to Bandon, I stopped at a gas station to fuel up, and there was a light not working on my camper, so I was crawled up on top of the camper working on it. And some guy that had a family with 2 kids, wife and 2 kids, they were stranded there at the gas station. Apparently the starter went out on their vehicle, and sometimes kind of like you probably had this happen to you a lot, Dave, where people try to take advantage of you. And in churches, you have that a lot. Well, they'll tell you the most fantastic story in the world. And so he's telling me, he spent money for a bad tire, and now his starter's out, and he needs to get that fixed. And I'm thinking, well, is this another one of those stories? But then the next thing that came to my mind is that gratitude. Thinking, God, all that you've just done for me, why would I even question these people? I just reached in my pocket and gave them whatever they needed to get that thing fixed. Because I thought, God, you have miraculous. You are an awesome God. I'm not going to question this person to get every detail. Are you telling me the truth here, You have a family and kids. I'm just going to help you, And so, I hope this story in some way helps you to see. I know it took a little longer than you normally, but I hope this story helps you to see that we serve an awesome God. If you've ever had any doubts about what God can do, the Bible says, hath he not said, will he not do? It says, God's word will not return unto him void. It says, God is the God of miracles. It says, whatever we ask, he shall do. There's promises after promises in the Bible. We have to hold on to those. Yeah, you may have gone through terrible times with divorces or cancer or whatever it is in life. You have to believe that God can get through all that. And God can make your life better, and it can be better in the future. Amen? And we serve an awesome God. So I hope this testimony today tells you that, what a powerful God we serve. Let's sing our closing song, okay?